Hi, good morning, everybody. And I'm not going to talk about optical fiber today, so don't worry. I'd like to share some thoughts about information, something that could be extremely simple, but could also be sometimes very complex. And the reason that I want to talk about information is because I think we're living this information age or information revolution. People are talking about that. But every time that we hear this term information age, information revolution, we usually get a comment just after that, yes, of course, the Justin Bieber video had, I don't know how many millions hits on YouTube in a week, or the fact that you can tweet what you had for lunch. And yeah, those things are interesting, they are maybe important too, but I think we're maybe missing the point. I think there is much more behind what we're living right now that we need to pay attention. Actually, there are some authors, Tom Siegfried in his book, The Beat and the Pendulum, is a beautiful book, and more recently, James Gleick in The Information. They actually make some very interesting analogies. They talk about information as an entity, as a physical entity, as important as it was energy during the Industrial Revolution. So the analogies that they do, they say, well, during the Industrial Revolution, we had a steam engine. That was the machine that was driving the revolution. And then you had this physical entity that we were controlling with that machine, which was energy. But we also had all this theory that was created behind it, the thermodynamics, physics, statistics, all that allow us to understand energy, to understand how to control, how to measure, how to do things with energy. So if information is an analogous to energy for the age that we're living right now, I think we have to have some sort of understanding similar to that. And if I ask you what's information, I'm sure that I'm gonna get some definitions here, right or wrong, doesn't matter. But every time that we try to understand something, the first step is actually to try to measure or quantify that. So if I ask you, how do you measure information? How you quantify information? Let's suppose that somebody sends a message saying, I'm having a wonderful cappuccino in this rainy afternoon. And I ask you, how much information is that? So the computer geeks in the audience will say, that's easy. I count how many characters. Each character is a byte. Each byte, 8 bits. Dun, 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 dun. Bingo, right? I got the number there. Is that the information? Or actually the information is the fact that that person is having a cappuccino and it's raining where the person is. Or maybe if you go one step beyond and say, well, the information is that that person is probably not in the middle of a stressful working day. Otherwise, will not be doing that, right? So we need to understand that. How are we going to measure this? And there are lots of very bright scientists, people in the 40s and 50s, von Neumann, Alan Turing, Claude Shannon, Wiener, Hartley, Nyquist. They start to look into this problem, and they come up with a pretty comprehensive theory about information. I'm not going to go through that. I'm going to try to oversimplify that in just a couple of slides here, with just the main concepts that I want to address. The first thing that they did, they said, well, you're transmitting information, you have to have a language. So let's suppose that you have an alphabet of S symbols in your alphabet, and let's suppose that you're sending a message of N characters. So how many permutations, possibilities you can have there? Well, S to the N possibilities. So imagine that your alphabet is A and B only, and you send a message of 2 characters. So you can send A, B, B, A, B, B, right? So that's the 2 to the second, 4, that's it. Now, or we can expand a little bit the example here and say, I don't have a Twitter account, believe it or not, but I believe it's 140 characters what you can send in a Twitter. So if the English alphabet is 26 characters plus a space, let's forget the little smile faces and all that. So that's the number that of different combinations that you can send in with 140 characters. And here's the number, it's actually a pretty big number. Now, of course, lots of those combinations there, they are not words. They are just letters that are, next to each other. So, okay, that was a very simplified way of looking. But they started from that. They started looking and saying, okay, let's take a look and let's see what I can do with that. How can I extract information from this language? How you extract information? You extract information asking questions. What's the simplest possible question that you can ask? It's a yes-no question, right? It's a question with 2 possibilities, 0, 1. That's why bit of information is 0, 1, right? 2 possibilities. It's a yes-no question. That's the quantum of information. Now, let's suppose then that I have this S to the N possibilities. That's all, whatever language I'm using, whatever communication system I'm using, have all those possibilities. I want to ask questions, a number of questions, to come up with which one was transmitted. So what they did is that, I ask one question, I can have 2 possibilities. I ask 2 questions, 4 possibilities. 3 questions, 8 possibilities, and so on. So if I ask, let's call age questions, I'm going to be able to, whatever age is, I'm going to be able to find out what's that. You can equal those 2 things, and you get to age, which is their first attempt to define information as age is n log of s. So the size of your message and also the size of your alphabet. And now you know why there's a log there, because of that exponential relationship. Well, this is very simplified, because again, it considers all possible permutations. Claude Shannon went one step beyond, and he said, no, we need to look into the probability, that's P there, probability of things to happen. That's where the information comes from. So it's a weighted average now, it's not a multiplication anymore. And he called that information entropy. But look, what's interesting on that generalization that he did is that now information is proportional to the inverse of the probability. So if there isn't a probability for an event to happen, if there is a lower probability, there is more information there. If there is a higher probability, there is low information there. So information is now connected to surprise, to uncertainty. So if you turn to Fox News and there is a good comment about the Republican Party, that is high probability. So there is less information there. Exactly the same thing applies to MSNBC, and the Democratic Party, right? And by the way, nothing wrong with that. Sometimes you like a song and you listen to that song several times, so you're not being surprised. That's entertainment, right? So let's separate things. If you want to feel good, you're listening things that you feel good about. That's totally fine. But we're trying to work a little bit more into the what is information. Now, if it is surprise, if it is uncertainty, then information is not only about the message itself. It also has to do with the transmitter and the receiver. Because depending on the receiver, maybe that receiver is surprised. Maybe you're surprised, maybe you're not. So the receiver is part of the information. So information is broader than just the message. Well, that starts to become more complex and more interesting, because this is information age or revolution now. What's happening is that we need to find out what's the value of information. And now the value of information depends, again, on the transmitter, and on the receiver, and on the message. So what's the value of a bit of information? I know the value of a joule of energy. I know what I can do with that. I know the value of a watt of power. I know what I can do with that. What can I do with a bit? Different bits for different people will do totally different things, right? A bit that defines the color of one of the pixels of that image over there doesn't have much value. It can change. It will not change much, right? If that bit is defining the first digit of your bank account, that's a totally different story. If you have a group of bits that's defining a tint in a mammogram that's sent digitally, that's a very different story. So it depends. The value changes. And more important than that is that now we are moving the world from a centralized to a distributed source of energy. Now we don't have those hubs where all the information comes from anymore. Now we have everybody putting information on the web, put information on the net. So the power of the web is not because it reaches everybody, but it's also because everybody can put new information there. And this is great, but also brings a problem. There's lots of stuff out there. So we need to separate the noise from the signal. There's lots of information, and we need to make sure that we prepare our next generation, we prepare our kids with the right skills to be able to find the signal in the middle of all that noise. Actually, with everything that's around, if you look into everything all the knowledge that's available today, sometimes I feel very surprised or disappointed when you ask a kid when he comes back from school and you say, okay, how was your day? And they say, boring. How come? Look what's around us today. Look at all the knowledge and how the availability of knowledge and all the fun things that you could do. So there is something wrong if they say it was boring. So we need to really think about that. And actually, when I was growing up in Brazil, my dad, he used to tell me and my brother that you guys should go to school to learn what not to do, because that was already done by somebody else. So he didn't grow up in an information age, but I think he got it, and I think he transmitted that very effectively to me and my brother, saying that, look, you have to, it's not because knowledge is everywhere that you should not get the background. Actually, you have to get the background even more now, because you have to be able to separate that so you can identify the signal, right, and use that. So be different, do something different, learn what everybody did, and then do something different. If that's the case, then the message that he was telling me is that it's everything about creativity. That's where we need to focus. That's where how we need to prepare our kids, how we need to prepare our next generation to be successful. If you think about going back to information surprise, does creativity surprise you? When you see something and say, wow, that was very creative. It's not because you were surprised. Maybe that inverse of the probability of something to happen. So there is a very interesting, actually it's one of the most viewed TED Talks from Sir Ken Robinson about creativity. And he talks about how we do a very good job in killing that in the very vibrant, fresh brains of our kids, right? They are born with all that capacity, that sponge brains ready to absorb everything, and we really kill that with time. There's a very interesting example that he gives where there's a little girl that was on the corner of a classroom, and she was drawing a picture, and the teacher came and said, "What you drawing?" And she said, "A picture of God." And the teacher smiled and said, "Nobody knows how God looks like." And the girl replied, "Well, they will in a minute." So, look how beautiful is that, right? Look how powerful is that. Is that fearless of creating? It's fearless of, but then we start, saturating those brains with what's right and wrong, and then we start dumping all that. Now, I don't know how creativity starts. I'm not sure if anybody knows what's the mechanism behind creativity, but I think we know that it starts with probably a spark between two neurons, right? We close that synapse between neurons, if there are any neurologists in the audience here, but I think that's what they say. So it starts with a connection. So that's how it starts. It starts with a connection. And it's between two of those neurons. Now look what's happening right now in our world. Why? So again, some of those authors, they say that the equivalent to the steam engine is the computer today. I'm not sure if I agree with that. I think that actually the equivalent to the steam engine is actually the fact that we are getting more and more connected, and that's what's changing the world. Today, just to give an example, there is about, one sentence about optical fiber, there is about 2 billion kilometers of optical fiber installed in the planet, and that's growing about 200 million kilometers per year, more. We're getting more and more and more connected. So what's the point here? We are getting this amazing superpower where we can get raw material to create from everybody. So we have access to all that raw material. So we are getting that superpower, but with every superpower you get a responsibility, right? So whatever you're doing, it also can impact lots of people, right? You have that power now. And that's the key point here. I think that what's happening is that the same way that two neurons in our brain, sometimes they spark together, and then they connect to the other neurons, and then a thought comes out, or an idea comes out of that. Now imagine that we are all neurons in this global brain, right? We are connecting to each other, and perhaps if two of us are connected, and that spark comes out of that, that could change the world, because now you have that power. And this is getting more and more and better and better. So what's the message here, right? I think there are two things that we have to think about. One, we need to make sure that those connections that we are creating are really englobing everybody. So everybody needs to have that power, right? Everybody needs to have that capability of being that initial spark that will change the world. So we need to increase that even more. So that connections, that number of connections is what really is going to create this revolution. The second thing is that we are living the information age. We are living this information revolution. I think we are enjoying, we are having fun with that. But I think we need to spend a little bit more time trying to understand what's that. Because only doing that will be able to prepare our kids for the next generation, or prepare them for what's coming. I think that's pretty important, and I'm not sure if we are spending enough time doing that. So those would be my two messages, and I thought that was worth sharing. Thank you very much.